Hi doll faces, let's continue now with the exploration of using tarot for shadow work. One thing that I would suggest is when you're working with the shadow, you kind of have to accept that the shadow is really a whole big bunch of stuff, okay? It incorporates a lot of different facets of the self which have been repressed or which make you feel uncomfortable, etc. So it's kind of like a black hole, and it's difficult to get a handle on exactly what is down there and kind of put it all under one name or under one idea. So what's best to do when you're working with the shadow is to break it down into different aspects or facets, or what I like to call shards. So draw a card to kind of represent one specific aspect of the shadow, and then take a look at the different ways in which that shadow tends to restrict you in your life. Using these surrounding cards here to get a handle on kind of how potent and powerful that part of the shadow aspect is and where it might be best to begin dealing with it. You can also use the elements for this. So if you've got a really good handle on the meanings of the 4 elements with regard to emotional and spiritual exploration, then you'll be able to take that one central aspect which you've identified. Maybe in this case it would be, I don't know, you hold grudges, you're not very good at forgiving, you're not very good at letting go of the past, whatever it is, with the 8 of Cups. But of course there are a million different interpretations, and it's down to you to be as honest and authentic with yourself as possible when doing this kind of work, to establish what that aspect really means for you. And then go through and use earth, air, fire and water as starting points for where that aspect is really causing you difficulty. For example, with water, that would be looking at where your shadow aspect comes up with regard to connections and relationships, love and friendship, and also your relationship to yourself and your own spiritual and emotional evolution, for example. And you can go through and do that with the meanings of each of the 4. You can also have a look at the different aspects of your outer life and see how this particular shadow aspect relates to that. For example, you might want to look at work and career, money and feelings of security or stability, relationships and social interactions, and then finally health and physical well-being. These are good ideas as well for enabling you to look at very specific parts of your life and how the shadow kind of shows itself there, or how that one aspect does at any rate. Sometimes it's a good idea before you begin shadow work to assess your readiness to do so. So you might want to use a spread something like this. Analyse, for example, first of all, the degree of self-love that you have at the moment and the degree of self-love that you practice, because I believe that's integral to the plot of doing positive shadow work. The amount of strength that you have to do shadow work at this time. How are your reserves holding up? Where is your energy being taken? And do you have enough to really do shadow work to the extent that you need to? Take a look also at your willingness to do shadow work. Is there any emotional resistance there to doing shadow work, for example? Have a look at how much you use your personal power in the external world. It might be a very good argument to say, for example, that if you're not using your personal power productively in outside situations, if you're surrendering your power at any point, then you might not have enough personal power in the pot to look into shadow work, which actually does require a big handle on your personal power. You might also want to look at the need for an external support system of some kind. Obviously with shadow work, it's very important to be your own friend and hold your own hand and all of that good stuff. But you may also wish to focus on how much outside support you may need, whether or not you require a mentor or guide for your shadow work. Do you have anyone you can speak to who's been through it and who's attempted a process of self-actualization? You know, how might you need other people around you to support you, and do you feel able to ask for that if you need it? So that's kind of like you assessing your readiness, and this is kind of a good example of self-care, I think. Take a look at examples of how a certain shadow aspect has affected you in your life. You know, how has it brought up challenges? How has it potentially forced you to miss out on opportunities or made you feel like you weren't worthy? That kind of thing. What were the negative effects of the shadow aspect at hand? And then have a look at the lessons that you've learned from that, and have a look at, you know, what you intend to feel and think about the different ways in which your shadow aspect did kind of hold you back. You know, what have you learned from the challenges that you've experienced with that shadow aspect? And then focus on healing, focus on forgiveness of the self, forgiveness of others, and ensure when you're looking at these particular cards that it is part of your mentality that you are going through a healing journey, that you're not using shadow work to punish yourself, criticize yourself, berate yourself, or anything of that nature. Really focusing here on healing the past effects of a shadow aspect and ensuring that that is your mission with shadow work, if you like. Oh, working one-handed, bit difficult. Now, something else you might want to consider, many people come to shadow work initially because they realise that they're telling themselves that they shouldn't be doing something or they shouldn't be feeling something. And in fact, their intuition or their deeper insight or their higher self is telling them that they should be doing that thing, and they're wondering why they're uncomfortable with it. And a lot of this is to do with conditioning. So what I would suggest is use the top layer of cards to think about things that you tell yourself you shouldn't be doing, certain attributes or qualities you have that you tell yourself that you shouldn't display, certain things that you've restricted yourself on, even though you know that you would quite like to explore that side of yourself and you would like to bring it to the surface. And what these cards will do is they'll help you to identify the things that you're telling yourself you shouldn't do, you shouldn't say, you shouldn't be, you shouldn't feel, and then helping you to explore the underlying conditioning or the root causes which are actually stopping you from embracing those parts of yourself. And use the bottom layer of cards to consider the things that you tell yourself you should do, which really deep down you know are just false obligations or really aren't feeding you, they're really not serving you, they're making you feel subservient or entrapped or repressed. And kind of question, why do you tell yourself that you should be doing those things, even though they don't serve your highest good? So this is actually a really powerful little spread. It really, really kicks shadow work arse, and I would definitely recommend going for it if you're really serious about shadow work. Finally, if you're embarking on a really potent bout of shadow work, you may want to have a look at how you relate to your inner child. So firstly, draw a card to have a look at how you respond to the notion, the very idea of the inner child. How does that go with you? Are you quite harmonised with it, or are you in resistance to it? And then take a look potentially at memories that you may have fostered or you may be reliving, which are proving difficult for you, and how you want to get through that. Take a look at your conditioning, your programming, the lessons that you learned in childhood which have contributed to the shadow self. Have a look at any present blocks with regard to working with the inner child and harmonising with it and ensuring that you're on side with it and you can use it to actually have a healthier and happier life rather than feeling like you want to run away from it because it hasn't really been healed. If the inner child does require healing, take a look at how you're going to begin that, how you're going to pursue it, and how you're going to honour that process. And then maybe also have a look at what you can do in order to instigate forgiveness of your parental figures or forgiveness of the people who may have foisted this conditioning onto you or taught you things which you're now having to effectively unlearn. So this is going to be a good spread as well. Good luck on your shadow work explorations. Do let us know how you're going with it and how it's working for you, and ask any questions if you want to. I will recommend one book, Tarot Shadow Work, Using the Dark Symbols to Heal by Christine Jett. I know people have had a lot of success with this book and really enjoyed it. So, if that is something that you want to get into, please do pick it up. And much love, blessed be.